Frustrated at the failure of their plots against the Islamic Republic, its enemies have waged a massive hybrid war on Iran, with extensive activities that target political institutions, manipulate public opinion, and undermine the security of Iranian citizens. The enemies, namely the United States, the Zionist regime, some insidious and malicious European powers, and linked terrorist groups, have come to the scene with all of their capabilities. Hybrid warfares combine military and non-military as well as covert and overt means, including disinformation, cyber attacks, economic pressure, deployment of irregular armed groups, and use of regular forces. These methods are used to blur the lines between war and peace and attempt to sow doubt in the minds of the target populations. They aim to destabilize and undermine societies and, if possible, overthrow governments. To know more, we met with Dr. Ghorbani, a senior expert on both hybrid and cognitive warfare. Mr. Ghorbani is also a prolific translator in this field. We asked him about the nature of hybrid warfare. Can you please provide us with an explanation and definition of hybrid warfare, and how is it different from other conventional warfares?
Hybrid
warfare as a concept is common in other countries also under different names. For example, the Chinese call it unlimited warfare, or in Russia it is called non-linear warfare. It's important to note that here we are not dealing with war, but with warfare which implies the complexity of the issue. In fact, in hybrid warfare, we are dealing with indirect, effective war imbued with ambiguity and grey areas. In comparison to other types of wars, hybrid warfare is less expensive and more effective. It seeks to score off rivals in the international arena.
A group hell-bent on supporting this type of activities against the Islamic Republic of Iran is a U.S. think tank called the Foundation for Defense of Democracy, well known for its ideological affinity with the Israeli government. In the past, its positions have closely tracked those of the Likud party and Israeli leaders, such as Benjamin Netanyahu, not just on Iran, but on the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians as well. Iran specialists of greater or lesser degrees of hawkishness are present throughout Washington, D.C.'s think tanks, such as the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the Brookings Institute, and the Council on Foreign Relations. But none of them have made an institutional specialty of recommending hardline Iran policies, such as economic terrorism called sanctions, and offering detailed proposals as how to implement them the way the Foundation for Defense of Democracies has done. For a closer look on this issue, please stay with us on this edition of Iran Today. Mr. Ghorbani told us after years of failed military actions, the Americans are now significantly shifting towards hybrid warfare.
در واقع امریکایی‌ها پی به این نکته بردن که اگر بخوان جنگی رو دنبال بکنن.
In fact, the Americans came to this understanding that if they were going to have both an effective and cost-effective type of war, they had to have think tanks linked to different layers of society. These think tanks are in fact the invisible soldiers of hybrid warfare who act in different forms and in different fields such as politics, security, intelligence, and even science. The Americans charge societies with anxiety, then seek to undermine the public trust toward their governments and then lead the country toward implosion. Meanwhile, they have no trace behind.
Since its founding in 2001, the FDD has carved out a niche for itself as a harbor for Washington, D.C.'s Iran hawks, with CEO Mark Dubowitz as its well-connected leader. The institution's media stardom, along with Dubowitz's own forceful Twitter feed, has built in an outsized reputation outside the U.S. to match its importance in Washington. However, top officials in the Biden administration often dismiss Washington's foreign policy think tank, such as FDD, as paid agents of Israel. John B. Wolfstall, the top arms control official in Barack Obama's White House, once called Dubowitz a moderate enabler of extremism, a moderate peddler of lies and half-truths. According to its website, FDD was founded to promote pluralism, defend democratic values, and fight the ideologies that drive terrorism. But as some journalists have noted, it arose out of an organization committed to burnishing Israel's reputation in the United States. On April 24, 2001, three major pro-Israeli donors incorporated an organization called Emet, that is Hebrew for truth. In an application to the U.S. Internal Revenue Service for tax-exempt status, they explained that the group was to provide education to enhance Israel's image in North America and the public's understanding of issues affecting Israeli-Arab relations. But in the wake of the September 11th attacks, the group's mission was broadened and its name changed to the Foundation for Defense of Democracies.
بنیاد حفظ دفاع دموکراسی اسم قشنگی داره.
The Foundation for Defense of Democracies has a beautiful name. Everyone who hears the name might say, wow, what a wonderful foundation. But what democracy it defends, and with what intentions?
This is Dr. Davoud Faridpour of Allame Tabatabai University.
اینها یه جوری من یه اصطلاح
They are the same Green Berets in the U.S. Army, but with different weapons. They have provided the U.S. Congress with consultation and testified before it for more than 200 times. It's very important to influence decision makers. In fact, they are the decision makers behind the scenes in the United States under the name of a beautiful name. When the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs put the foundation on its sanction list, the ministry referred to them as a group who intentionally seek to act against the interest of the Islamic Republic.
FDD describes itself as a global research organization, but according to experts, it has conducted its research from a particular vantage point and with a relatively narrow focus. Its research and advocacy have centered on West Asia and in particular on conflicts and issues that impinge on Israel. And its positions have closely tracked those of the Likud party and Benjamin Netanyahu, not just on the issues related to Iran, but also those related to Israeli occupation of Palestine and the desirability of a two-state solution. Understanding the think tank's ideological affinity with the Israeli government and the roots of that affinity helps explain the special role that FDD has played in opposing the Islamic Republic's dealings with the U.S. West Bloc and in particular regarding the Iran nuclear deal, formerly known as the JCPOA. Can you explain some of the instances and examples of the hybrid war that has been waged against Iran?
یه مثال مصداقی براتون عرض بکنم. ببینید برجام اتفاق افتاد.
After the JCPOA, or the Iran nuclear deal, sanctions on Iran apparently were lifted. They let other countries and companies interact with Iran. But nothing happened. No one came to the country because they feared that the sanctions would be reimposed sooner or later. This is an example of hybrid warfare.
In their writings, FDD experts endorse a view of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict that is in accord with, and even sometimes to the right of, the views proposed by Netanyahu and the Likud party. A vivid example is when in November 2007, FDD senior fellow Andrew McCarthy wrote in the National Review that the Bush administration, in trying to forge a two-state solution, was hell-bent on granting statehood to savages who worship martyrdom. In a January 2023 article, the FDD presented a comprehensive plan for American policymakers and allies to overthrow the Islamic Republic of Iran. An extremely detailed, comprehensive strategy that called for the use of multiple instruments of overt and covert American power. The plan included economic warfare, support for anti-Iran proxy forces and dissidents, and an all-out offensive against the Islamic Republic's ideological legitimacy. This is Dr. Bahman Kazemi, another expert on hybrid warfare. Dr. Kazemi believes that in hybrid warfare, a country is targeted as a whole. What are some of the reasons that the United States has waged a hybrid war against Iran?
Look, these days wars seek to impact the target country as a whole. For example, if I want to make a car stop working, I can explode it with dynamite. But this both costs me a lot and makes a lot of noise. It attracts attention and I can't evade responsibility. But there is also another way for this purpose. I can puncture the car's tires. They want to stop the machine of the government with the least possible cost. So they are looking for sensitive points to target.
Subsequently, FDD has gotten involved in the execution of a multi-layer war campaign against the Islamic Republic composed of a wide range of actions, including but not limited to organizing the war of narratives and extensive psychological operations against the leader of the Islamic Republic and the institutions attributed to him. Presenting misleading information and statistics on several media outlets, including the C-SPAN network and the U.S. Congress. Supporting the approval of the comprehensive law to sanction Lebanon's Hezbollah. Organizing anti-Iran terror groups and activities. Supporting the establishment of intelligence and missile bases in the periphery of Iran. Supporting covert operations against nuclear facilities and assassination of Iranian nuclear scientists. Projecting suspicion about Islamic law and order such as retribution and hijab. Holding joint meetings with AIPAC centered on Iran. Encouraging European lawmakers to sanction the Islamic Revolution Guard Corps. Exaggerating and presenting deceptive news about the goals and nature of Iran's peaceful nuclear activities. Disillusioning the young generation of Iranians about their lives in Iran and opportunities abroad. Manipulating the public trust in the government institutions. And consulting with Hollywood filmmakers to make movies with the themes of Iranophobia and Islamophobia.
Why has the U.S. waged a hybrid war against Iran, and what is its ulterior and ultimate goal?
If you want to conquer a country, if you can do it by force, it would be the most direct way. So you attack the country, you conquer that, and that's all you have the country. But if you cannot do that, you need to adhere to other tools and means of warfare. And that's what has happened. The United States knows and has believed that it cannot attack Iran militarily, and there is no military force that it can put on Iran to win the war. So it is trying to work in other fields, including the hybrid warfare tactics, so that it can destabilize the country from within.
We met with Dr. Hamidreza Gholamzadeh, an Iranian political analyst, in an Asian house dating back to over 100 years ago, which once belonged to Nasseruddin Shah's daughter.
Can you provide us with some examples and instances of hybrid warfare against Iran?
Currently, the majority of what Americans are doing against Iran is mainly in hybrid warfare, and especially in the domain of public opinion. If you remember just a few years ago when we were dealing with the pandemic, the COVID-19, this campaign was very strong at that time. So you could see a lot of disinformation and fake news being published by officials and mainstream media, which are supported by the Americans, and it's no secret, that were again trying to destabilize the country and to dissatisfy the people with the government inside Iran. So the Americans were not selling and giving Pfizer vaccine to anyone, not only to Iran, but also to their own neighbors and allies. But the media, the Western media, mainstream media, mostly supported by the American government, were trying to actually cast it to the people inside Iran that their government does not want them to have access to the vaccine. So the information that they were broadcasting at the people inside Iran was just psychological warfare to make them worried about the situation. Only you see during those era is that they are trying to tell Iranians that the situation inside Iran is terrible and you cannot do anything. Your officials are doing nothing for you. They are doing bad things, mismanaging, and misdeeds are happening in your country, and you without providing any significant or evidence for those issues that they are publishing to the people.
Furthermore, FDD has recently been disseminating false and misleading news about Iran's logistical activities and support in Russia's special operations in Ukraine, with the aim of bringing more sanctions on airline companies and drone manufacturing industries of Iran's Ministry of Defense. To Dr. Kazemi, the so-called Foundation for Defense of Democracies has targeted Iran's three important sections: the government, the economy, and culture.
خب این اقدامات بنیاد بر 3 تا اصل بنا نهاده شد.
The foundation is targeting Iran's three main sections: the government, the economy, and culture. As for the government, they launch an international campaign against the Islamic Republic. Take the issue of freedom of speech and human rights, for example. They are putting pressure on Iran with publishing incorrect information about the situation of human rights in Iran. At the same time, they are targeting the people's culture and values through different TV and radio channels, social media, and other outlets.
There's plenty more right after a quick glance at some news excerpts. Welcome to the news section of the program, where we will go over some news excerpts from different news websites, starting with Tehran Times. Biden administration surrenders to Iran. Experts of the anti-Iran think tank Foundation for Defense of Democracies in America said that the prisoner exchange agreement shows Biden's weakness towards Iran, and it is a sign of a weakness in sanctions policies. Mark Dubowitz, head of the FDD, believes that it is good news that the American hostages illegally arrested by Iran are returning home. But paying a $6 billion ransom only means that the Islamic Republic will take more hostages. This action has become a profitable tool to extort the U.S. The American think tank's use of terms such as hostage-taking and blackmailing are instances of falsification. They were detained because they were spying on Iran, and their crime is clear. Secondly, the real hostage-taker is the evil American government, which has put pressure on some governments to not pay Iran's money so that the Iranian people submit to American blackmail. Mehrnouz reads, General Hajizadeh stresses hybrid defense against enemy's war. Commander of IRGC Aerospace Force, Brigadier General Amir Ali Hajizadeh, says the Islamic Republic of Iran has prepared a hybrid defense strategy in the face of the enemy's hybrid war. Referring to the enemy's hybrid war against the Iranian nation, he underscored that the enemy is waging a hybrid war against the Iranian nation, and we, on the other front, must be able to operate in all directions by implementing a hybrid defense. Definitely, we are progressing on that path well. According to Tehran Times, why is the West eager to incite riots in Iran? Iran faced extraordinary unrest last year, while positive developments occurred in the surrounding region. Is this merely a coincidence? Euronews, a media outlet that aims to offer a European viewpoint on global matters, recently released a report on the unrest in Iran, timed to coincide with the first anniversary of the riots in the country. Viewing the last year's events in Iran from a different perspective is essential to fully comprehend them. These were not simply protests or riots, but a manifestation of the West's larger strategy to confront Iran through a full-scale hybrid war that employs all available means to weaken or overthrow the Iranian government. This brings us to the end of this section. Please stay tuned as we go back to our main narrative.
According to independent journalist, FDD's chief Mark Dubowitz has been a harsh critic of the Iranian nuclear deal, formerly known as JCPOA, from the very start, and has yet to come up with a substitute for it that would work. And why would he need to, asks the journalist. He has always had his eyes on a larger prize, which has nothing to do with democracy or any nuclear agreement.
The short-term objective of the United States is to remove the obstacle of Iran in terms of its regional policies, because its policies in the Middle East and the West Asia is actually affected by the presence of Iran as a regional power. But in long term and more basically, the point is that the Islamic Republic of Iran is providing a new form of governance and a new school of thought in governance that is totally against what the Americans and Western world actually are following, and they feel an existential threat from the existence of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So in long term, regardless of what they say or claim, the only thing that they want is to remove the Islamic Republic of Iran from this country.
As some of the statements Dubowitz has made over the years on Iran clearly demonstrate, his goal in Iran is regime change. After Obama took office, FDD, led by Dubowitz, proposed imposing further sanctions on Iran to force it to abandon its nuclear program. But Dubowitz himself was skeptical about whether sanctions would actually lead to a diplomatic solution. In April 2011, after new sanctions had been imposed, he told Israel's Ynet News that the sanctions are working by putting pressure on Iran, although they have not secured their objective and may never do so, putting an end to Iran's nuclear program. The best way is to work towards changing the regime. Reportedly, Dubowitz has been helping design and push forward sanctions on Iran since well before they became the centerpiece of Trump's policy toward Islamic Republic. He was closely involved in legislation for sanctions on Iran's central bank and oil sector in 2011, and in making it harder for Tehran to move money in 2012. He helped lead the charge against the emerging nuclear deal beginning in 2013, establishing the FDD as DC's ground zero for research and policy recommendations aimed at highlighting and fixing what Dubowitz saw as the flaws in the nuclear agreement. He and his organization attracted headlines in the process and were the go-to place for journalists seeking quotes from the deal's critics.
The question is, what's their ultimate goal? They want to sow distrust among people towards the government. They want the public to have a distorted image of what is happening in society through spewing out fake news and misinformation. They blow shortages out of proportion and do whatever it takes to make the government lose its legitimacy, lose its public support. They want to undermine the government as a whole.
A 2015 profile in Slate magazine, for example, traced the think tank's rise, noting how its employees appeared before Congress and on cable news to discuss the Iran deal far more frequently than scholars affiliated with longer established and better funded think tanks.
Meanwhile, the Iranian Foreign Ministry has added the Foundation for Defense of Democracies and its executive chief, Mark Dubowitz, to its list of sanctioned entities a few years ago, holding them responsible for the designing, imposing, and intensifying of economic terrorism against the Islamic Republic and the Iranian nation.
According to a Western human rights watchdog, over the years, broad U.S. sanctions against Iranian banks, coupled with aggressive rhetoric from U.S. officials, have drastically constrained Iran's ability to finance humanitarian imports. The consequences of ongoing U.S. sanctions, whether intentional or not, have posed a serious threat to Iranians' right to health and access to essential medicines, and have almost certainly contributed to documented shortages, ranging from a lack of critical drugs for epilepsy patients to limited chemotherapy medications for Iranians with cancer. At the core of the harmful impacts of multi-layered U.S. sanctions on Iran is that in practice, these sanctions have largely deterred international banks and firms from participating in commercial or financial transactions with Iran, including for exempted humanitarian transactions due to the fear of triggering U.S. secondary sanctions on themselves. As a result, Iranians' access to essential medicine and their right to health is being negatively impacted and may well worsen if the situation remains unchanged, thereby threatening the health of millions of Iranians. On several occasions, U.S. officials have indicated that the pain U.S. sanctions are causing for ordinary Iranians is intentional, part of a strategy to compel Iranian citizens to demand their government to change behavior, a recipe for collective punishment that infringes on Iranians' economic rights. According to the UN Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the authoritative body of independent experts that interprets the obligations of states, a country or coalition imposing economic sanctions needs to take into account the impact on the human rights of the affected population, including the right to health. These rights must be taken fully into account when designing sanctions.
To what extent should hybrid warfare be taken seriously? And what are some of the ways or measures to avoid hybrid warfare being waged against the country?
یک زمان صلح، یک زمان پایان داره، ولی شما امروز در عرصه چهارمی از جنگ‌ها روبرو هستید.
In classic wars, there are wartime and peacetime, a starting point and an ending point. But in hybrid warfare, there's no such thing as an ending point for war. It can rage on and on for years and forever. Its continuity is now possible with the help of artificial intelligence and cyber technologies. They can erode government's progress, and at the end of the day, you can see that they can no longer make decisions or solve problems. Against such a backdrop, having knowledge and at the same time patience are of paramount importance in dealing with hybrid warfare.
That's all for today. Thank you for watching from the whole team. I hope you enjoyed this edition as valuable and informative. Please do tune in same time next week and each week after. Don't forget to send your comments and topic requests. Till next time, take care.